Hello and welcome to the Indian Express News Analysis. So today's date is 30th November of 2018 and here we discuss all the important articles which are important from your exam perspective. So let's have a quick look at all the important articles that we're to discuss today. Before that, if you have not subscribed to my channel Military Mantra, please subscribe because here you get daily The Hindu analysis along with Indian Express analysis in Hindi and English. And if you go to playlist, you'll find lectures on Indian polity and economics. Followed which the first article over here is about GDP. So as we understand, the GDP is basically the total amount of goods and services produced within the territory of the country. So here the whole controversy is a change in the base year and wherein you are giving the GDP growth for the earlier years also. So earlier this used to be an academic procedure, but right now this has turned into political. So we'll try to understand the nuances into it. This particular article is about gene editing. As we understand that, say gene editing using the CRISPR technology. So what you're doing is, say there is an HIV virus in particular gene available. All you need to do is to remove it. So all these technology has been developed is being said by one of the scientists, and we'll try to investigate how truth is that and how much is it a fiction. This particular article is completely political in nature, so we are not going to discuss. So this article is regarding the education for all the migrant workers, because as we understand, the migrant workers move from one state to another, one country to another, and what are the possibilities for the education for their children. We'll try to investigate the whole issue. And this particular article is about terrorism. As we understand this particular terrorism, there are three important concepts which has been said in this particular article. That terrorism cannot actually hold a ground for a longer time. Say an example of Islamic State, they were actually spreading the terrorist ideas, but they were not able to capture the whole land for a longer time. Also, on a contrary note, you can actually take an example of Afghanistan here. You understand that the Taliban there is been existing since 2000, and you understand that it's growing its power. So this is something which you need to understand when it comes to terrorism, that it cannot be isolated at a place. It's ideas and the whole ideas of terrorism and actually creating the violence increases using our cyber media. Following which, this is very important articles related to healthcare, and what has been talked here is how exactly can we actually incorporate our traditional and modern medicines so that we can cater to the primary health centers. So it's a very important article. We'll discuss it in detail. So today's quotation is, there will be obstacles, there will be doubters, there will be mistakes, but with hard work there are no limits. So this was said by Michael Phelps. So let's start our discussion. So the first article is about the GDP growth figure. So what we need to understand here is the base year was changed to 2011 and 12. And coming to how do you change the base year and the reason why we need a base year. So say you want to compare your performance in your exam. So last exam you got say 20 out of 50, and this exam this month you got 30. So you know you have improved by 10 marks compared to the previous month. In the same way, when you want to calculate the GDP growth, you actually compare it with the previous year, but that was changed, and that was changed to some base year. The reason why we have a base year is instead of a previous year is because base year is usually selected as that year wherein there is not much fluctuation when it comes to say the amount of goods that you have produced, or basically the services that you have given. That means that year economic activity is not so much affected by the monsoon, demonetization, economic activities, anything you say. All those things have been stable. Only those years are selected as base year. And the next thing that you understand here is, right now the dispute is the numbers that being shown here as economic growth is not reflecting the real economy is the question here. And also National Statistic Commission here has actually given us the numbers saying there hasn't been a double digit growth ever since the 2 decades. So that is something which has been a new revelation here, and that has been contradicted by IMF and RBI numbers. And coming to GDP concept here, we understand by nominal GDP, that means the amount of goods and services that you have produced is using that account, we get at the sixth position, and we have recently actually superseded France, and we are within 2 years we'll actually pass UK also and come to fifth position. And now you can see another graph here. This is based on purchasing power parity. That means how much are you capable of buying based on your currency. As you understand, if you want to buy a laptop, it will be very easy and very cheap when it comes to buying a laptop in US. And if you want to buy, say, burger or anything food item, it's very cheap in India. So based on all these various items, we have got a number, fixed number, and based on that we calculate purchasing power parity. And if you want to know more about it, all you can do is you can go to playlist, and on there you can find the lectures on GDP and economic section. And following which, in this graph, we understand here based on the purchasing power parity, our ranking is third. And the next article here is about traditional and modern medicine. So as we understand here is the importance of health in our life. Even if you go to sustainable development goals, which the whole purpose of SDG is to get in our life more improved. That means the standard of living has to be improved at every perspective. So we have such 17 goals which we have to achieve by 2030. And here you can see the goal number 3 is basically good health and well-being. So this is what we are going to concentrate on this particular article. We understand our health is not just defined by what we eat, but also what is happening around our environment. Say the amount of pollution that is increasing, you can talk about air pollution, water pollution, noise, all these actually affects your health. And also one of the important factors that we are concentrating here on is the nutrition value here. Because we understand Food Security Act of 2013 is providing us the food, but the question arises is, does it provide us the right amount of nutrition to us or not? That's a question that needs to be answered. And the next thing that you need to understand here is there are a lot of non-communicable diseases like cancer, hypertension, diabetes, and which we need to reduce it by 2030. So this is what we have as a target. And also one of the possible way how we can actually achieve all of them is by providing universal health coverage. And that means that you're providing health services to everybody in your country. And for that, you need to make sure that the primary health centers are well equipped with machines and the doctors there. And even if you think about the Kazakhstan's Astana declaration, we have understood for actually getting a very well equipped primary health center, we just don't need the scientific but also the traditional knowledge. And that is exactly where the Ayush comes in. So Ayush stands for Ayurveda, Unani, Naturopathy, Siddha, and Homeopathy. So what it does is all these doctors who are trained in Ayush, they can be given a bridge course so that they can actually provide their services even in this primary health center. So this is one of the suggestions which government has it in mind. And the next thing is about what government is actually implementing. So we understand about the Ayushman Bharat. So it is a basically insurance-based scheme wherein the out-of-pocket expenditure is trying to be reduced. But the main challenges here are the implementation ones. You need to first of all identify the right beneficiary, for which you have to train the people who are going to work on the ground on all these hospitals. And provided that, you have to make sure that the insurance companies here are not just profit making but also providing welfare to the people. And the third and the most important thing here is to actually build the capability of your public health center and not just the private health, because we understand there is a difference between the medication that you get in the private hospitals and the public hospitals. So we need to make sure here that the private hospitals act as a benchmark rather than the backbone of our healthcare sector. And the next article here is about terrorism, which I've already told you. And this was perspective. The whole article about terrorism was about Indonesia, but that is not so important from your exam point of view. But the map location is very important. Just try to understand here that the capital of Indonesia is Jakarta, and the adjacent state here, you can see right over here a small country known as Singapore, followed with this Malaysia here, Philippines. You can see Timor Leste here, Australia here, and Papua New Guinea here. And the next very important article is about the education policy regarding the children of migrants. So as I've already told you about migrants, you can take an example of seasonal migrants here. Say you are a construction worker here, you live in Uttar Pradesh, but you are moving to Gujarat. Now you understand here, you are actually dropping all the schemes that were supposed to be given to you just because you are migrated from your home state to another state in search of job or basically knowledge, all those things you have moved, right? Now the question you need to ask if you are the education minister is, are your schools so much flexible to actually encourage such movement of children, because you are moving from one school to another? Does your school has that amount of flexibility to actually encourage such movements? So this is something which you need to ask. And even in UNESCO's recent report known as Building Bridges and Not Walls is asking us the right question here. Does our schools are providing so much access or basically facilities to the children so that if I want to move from UP to Gujarat, Gujarat to Bengal, does my education gets affected? And also using the 2009 Right to Education Act which was implemented, we need to ask one more question, that we are giving free and fair education to all, but does that assure that all these migrant workers children are also getting this? Because based on the global education monitoring report, which is basically a report wherein we're actually monitoring all the students who are going out of the schools, and what we find is 8 out of 10 children have no access to education when it comes to the migrant workers. So this is something which is very much alarming, and followed which there have been various say action which has been taken by various states here. Take an example of Gujarat here. They brought in a seasonal boarding school wherein season by season number of students who join here are changing, and also they have a mechanism which is online child tracking system wherein they are actually tracking the activity of every child when is moving from one school to another. They even come to know if he becomes a dropout or not. So that is something which can be integrated across the country. Followed which, what we need to understand here is, in order to make sure that every child, irrespective of what background he belongs to, should get the right amount of education, what we need to do is look at all the right places. Take an example of the slum area. Usually, policymakers are not doing anything to actually reduce the amount of slums that we have in our country. Also, we need to make sure that the highest amount of, say, the health issues and education issues comes up in the slum area. So, we need to make sure that you have some of the schemes and also some of the projects for this area also. Following which, the next article is about the genetically modified embryo. So you can take an example of embryo right over here. So after fertilization, what happens is the cell actually say it increases by 2, 4, and 8. So it goes on till you become a fetus here, and that's exactly what the child becomes. So what has been said here is, say the father's genes have HIV and the mother does not. So how exactly can you remove that genes so that the child which has been brought into the world does not have HIV? So this technology has been developed by this person known as Jian Hakai. So he says that he has used CRISPR-Cas9 technology. That means it is directly related to biotechnology wherein you are actually removing or cutting the genes of irrelevant and gaining more of it using the RNAs. So what you need to understand here is, this particular invention that he claims is not being peer reviewed. What means by peer review is, whenever you actually bring out say an international article, so what happens is all those scientists who are working on the similar nature actually are going to review your work. That didn't happen when it comes to this particular invention. And also this was actually shown in the second international summit for genome editing. And based on what has been observed here is, say you want to change the characteristics of a person or a plant, there are a lot of genes involved in it. So this is not so easy technically to actually go and change so many genes. So that's the reason people are questioning his invention, or basically the feat that he has actually done by designing babies here, because he's trying to edit embryos here. So that's the reason a lot of people are questioning about his invention. Followed which, let's try to understand all the important articles in the whole newspaper. As you see in the first front page itself, on the page 1 you have the issue relating to CBI. So Alok Verma, who was basically the director of CBI, is asking question, based on the Delhi Special Police Establishment Act, he was not supposed to be moved, or his tenure cannot be changed within 2 years. So he's actually questioning the whole particular clause here. So the government is saying it's not just a transfer, just a holiday that has been given to him. Followed with the next article is about HICE. That means Hyperspectral Imaging Satellite, which was launched by PSLV C-43 on Thursday. So this is something which you need to remember. Followed which, this is about Maharashtra, as we have already discussed this, that they are supposed to give reservation to Maratha community, and they're going to give it 16% of their quota. And what happens after this is, the ceiling of reservation increases more than 50%. And based on Indrasani case, we had discussed that even if the reservation should never increase the 50% ceiling, and if it does, Supreme Court can actually nullify the whole act. And right now, even the Legislative Assembly have passed the reservation. That is something which you need to know as a development. Followed which, this article is about Justice Corinne Joseph. So he's going to retire. So what important is in this article is, it talks about the importance of judiciary. Because say at the time of, say, Rohingya issue, if PIL is gone, if the Supreme Court chooses not to respond to it, what happens is, if the men with the most wisdom are quiet, what happens is the justice delivery becomes very much delayed. So all those things important to judiciary has been written in this particular article. Followed with, this is about G20 news. What's happening here is our PM is going to visit Argentina for this G20 summit, and also he'll be visiting the Saudi prince. The reason why Saudi Arabia is in news was because Jamal Khashoggi was basically a journalist, was assassinated in Istanbul. Followed which the whole world was trying to isolate Saudi Arabia, and the whole accusation was going to Mohammed bin Salman. That's the reason this particular news article becomes very important. Following with, this article is about Johnson and Johnson, because most of the implants they have been selling has been saying that this does not actually have the quality control being done. Most of the metals that have starting to erode the humans. That's the reason they want to pay compensation to all those patients who are using their products here. So health ministry has come up with a compensation formula which will be implemented for every patient here. Following which, this article is about Shraddha Peeth. As we understand, the Kartarpur corridor was opened. That is basically a 4-kilometer corridor between India and Pakistan, which is a visa-free. On the same note, this particular place is located in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, and this is a very much important sentiment when it comes to Kashmiri Pandits. So the same thing has been asked when it comes to faith diplomacy, so that even the Kashmiri Pandit can visit this particular shrine known as Shraddha Peeth. Coming to, this is about the controversy between Russia and Ukraine. So this is particular strait known as Kerch Strait, which is in the bone of contention right over here. What happened here is Ukraine actually sent their ships here, and it was captured by Russia. And this is against United Nations laws of the sea, and that's the reason this has been news in the recent times. Followed with this article from Sri Lanka. As we understand, their earlier Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe was actually withdrawn, and instead of his place, Rajapaksa was came in. And Rajapaksa is basically known as the pro-China, and the same thing can be seen in this particular article. They have signed a new port deal with China, and as you understand, even in the recent times, they have actually signed a deal for Hambantota, which went on lease for 99 years. And that's the same trick China uses with every country, the debt trap. So the same thing happened with Pakistan, Maldives, China, and the African countries. So the same thing is happening with Sri Lanka. And the next article is from the economic page. This is about the NBFC, non-banking financial companies, which are basically shadow banks. And the reason why this is very important is because of the say the fraud that was happening in ILFC, because they were not able to pay the short-term loans. Followed which, the rise of NPA, which can happen if MSMEs keep taking loans from NBFC, which was actually reported by Raghuram Rajan. All those things become very important. You can understand about more about NBFC using this article. Following which, on the sports page, there are two important things that you need to know is the men hockey World Cup will happen in Odisha. Where exactly? Bhubaneswar. So the location might be asked in any of your exam, and also the next question could be which sport is Magnus Carlsen related to? That is a very simple question that might be asked in your CAPF or CDS. So you need to know he plays chess here. So that's all for today, guys. So let's just discuss everything that we discussed on the editorial page, because we discussed a lot of articles on the rest of the paper. So on the editorial page, we discussed about, just give me a second. Yeah, we discussed about the genetically modified embryo technology, which was question, followed with the education policy for the migrant workers, and following was the importance of terrorism when it comes to various countries. And here on this particular article, it was about Indonesia, followed with the importance of healthcare system using traditional and modern medicines. And then we discussed about the quarrel going on the GDP base year change. So all those things were discussed in this video. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel and share it with your friends as much as you can. Thank you and have a nice day. Jai Hind.